Several months ago, United Way of Central Indiana hired its 15th president and CEO, Fred Payne, who has since hosted a series of community meet and greets. Hello, I'm Shari, Finnell, editor of Charitable Advisors Not-for-Profit News. Bryan, Orander, and I recently welcomed Fred for a conversation about what inspires him about nonprofit work, insights about the feedback he has heard from the community, and how he believes nonprofits can continue to evolve amidst change. Thank you for joining us. Fred, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. So we understand that you've done several meet and greets. So we appreciate this opportunity to have other people who may not have been able to make those to meet you virtually through this podcast. So what has it been like for the first couple of months of your tenure in this role?
Well, thanks for asking me that. The first couple of months they've been eye-opening in the sense that I felt a lot of energy when I first walked in the building and I met, my new team members of the United Way of Central Indiana. And I'm feeling that same type of energy as I'm getting out and talking to community leaders and community partners of the United Way, because they understand the magnitude of the challenge that we have ahead of us. They also understand the impact that the United Way has had thus far. And they are excited, just like I am, about continuing to partner to address some of the needs in our local communities.
Great. So we understand that you have had an interesting background before coming to United Way. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Okay. I'll start with how I first came to Indiana. I'm originally from Louisiana. I attended law school down in Bloomington, and I met my spouse there. She was from Michigan, and her intent was to return to Michigan after school. My intent was to return to Louisiana. And we both ended up making Indiana our home for over 20 something years now. So we are Hoosiers by choice. And when I started practicing law in Indianapolis, I started doing labor and employment law, litigation, and insurance defense work. I migrated specifically to the employment and labor side for some years. And then when Honda was going to open up a facility in Indiana, I started working with Honda and helped start their legal division, and ultimately started overseeing all of the business operations at Honda in the business division. Then in 2017, Governor Holcomb wanted to bring sort of an industry approach to workforce development, and he asked that I oversee the Department of Workforce Development. So in December of 2017, I joined his cabinet as the commissioner of the Indiana Department of Workforce Development. And for those who may be unfamiliar with the agency is responsible for employment and reemployment services throughout the state. Part of the agency is responsible for job training, job resources, and all things related to a person getting skilled and getting trained to be prepared to go into a career of their choice. In addition to that, we ensure that we're working with employers to ensure that we do have the training that they need so that we can match them with candidates. The other side of the Department of Workforce Development House is administering the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, where we provide unemployment benefits to those individuals who find themselves in that uncomfortable position of being out of work. And so we administer that system. So in 2017, I started overseeing that department. And in 2018, just about a month or so after I started in that role, I had an opportunity to experience one of our programs that helped individuals who did not have a high school diploma to receive them with one of our business partners. And the individuals would actually work, and then they would go and take classes to get their high school equivalency, but they were also paid a wage while they were doing so. So that helped a person get over that barrier of trying to provide income while still trying to receive a high school equivalency. And so During that time, we met a young lady who didn't have a high school equivalency about a year and a half prior. She was a part of the program. Fast forward a year and a half later, she had high school equivalency. She had gotten about two promotions on her job. And she told us that she was enrolled in Ivy Tech classes. That showed me at that point just the power of when you help people in our communities remove barriers. Because just a year and a half prior, and according to her, she had worked practically every fast food and low wage job actually it was in the Bloomington area at the time. And a year and a half later, she found herself in a different position and her trajectory had changed. Not only her trajectory, but the trajectory of her 3 young children. And fast forward, we moved to 2020 when everything kind of changed for all of us. And from the unemployment side of the house, things changed rather quickly and dramatically. Prior to March 2020, on average, about 2,500 to 3,500 individuals would file for unemployment benefits on a weekly basis. Moving into March 2020, that number shot up to about 64,000 in about a week's time. And then the following week, we were somewhere around 170,000 people filing for those benefits. There was no runway for this. It just happened quickly, just like things happened pretty quickly in March 2020 for all of us. And during that time between 2020 and 2021, and moving into 2021, the Department of Workforce Development paid provided benefits to somewhere close to about a little over 900,000 individuals in the state. That is an extreme number, and every state was going through that at the time. But that also showed how vulnerable some of our neighbors are. So when we look in central Indiana, about 220,000 people are living in or close to poverty. So it was those types of things that really led me to say that, I wanted to make sure that I continue to be a part of our solutions in our community. And the opportunity to lead the United Way seemed like the right fit at the right time for me, because I really see the need, and I really want to make sure that we build coalitions to really help the needs that we have in the community.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Fred. So as you've come into this job, then we kind of, Shari opened with kind of these forums, but what's been the process to kind of get you acquainted? In the warm up, we kind of said, we're not going to ask for your long-term vision because you've been there less than 2 months at this point, but what's been the kind of the, throwing you into the deep end kind of exercise to let you really learn what's going on and you connect with a different segment of the community?
Well, I'm a data person. I believe in looking at data and see where the data leads you. But the data is only one part of the puzzle. But really getting out and talking to people who, one, are engaged in the work that's helping the communities, and actually getting out and talking to the people that it's impacting. So we started a series of initial meet and greets for me to go around and for me to have meetings and discussions and introductory sessions with community leaders, our community partners, for them to be introduced to me and reintroduce myself to some. And for us to really have a dialogue, actually the beginning of a dialogue about how we can continue to help Central Indiana and the people in Central Indiana to live the lives they're capable of living. So we completed those meet and greets on last week. And we started in Greencastle, and we actually ended at the Edna Martin Center here in Indianapolis on last week. So we traveled to Putnam County, Hendricks County, Hancock County, Morgan County, Hamilton County, Marion County. And so we spent some time really just listening and talking. And quite honestly, that was part of my 120-day plan to make sure the first 30, 60 days, I'm really doing a lot of listening and learning. And those meet and greets were designed to do just that.
So, Fred, what was some of the feedback that you received during those meet and greets?
Some of the feedback centered around the magnitude of the challenge that we have ahead of us. There were questions about how would we continue to address some of the things that we know that are what I call leading indicators to poverty, and would the United Way continue to support certain initiatives. There were a variety of questions asked around vision and direction. And specifically when it comes to vision and strategic planning, we are in the process of developing a strategic plan. There was a pause put in the strategic plan, and while my transition was occurring, and we picked that back up. So one of the things that I share with our community partners was that we will focus on a few things as we develop our strategic plan, as we continue to move forward. And that is making sure that we filter everything that we do off of three questions. That first one is there an initiative or is there activity that the United Way is engaged in? Is it impacting poverty? The second question is it good for our community? And then is it sustainable? Those are the three questions that we're going to approach our actions and our activities as it relates to trying to have an impact in our community. And if the answer is yes to each one of those three questions, then the initiative or the activity could be something that the United Way will consider moving forward with. But if the answer is no to any one of those, then chances are that initiative or that activity will fall to the bottom of the priority list, because we want to make sure that we are doing two things: focusing on things that are going to impact poverty and making sure that people are stable enough so that they can begin to move out of poverty. And so we had a lot of questions around those types of things. We did get some feedback and questions around equity. How would the United Way continue to address equity in the environment that we're in now? And part of what I shared with some of our community partners was really looking back at the history of the United Way. And we went back and we looked at some data from 2017. And since 2017, when it comes to how the United Way of Central Indiana has focused on neighborhoods that are 50% or more ethnic minorities or brown and Black neighborhoods, the United Way of Central Indiana, with the investments of its donors, has invested over $119 million in those communities. And that shows the magnitude of the work and the investment that organizations are doing within our communities. And we want to make sure that we continue to do that. And we want to make sure that we continue to have a focus on those things that's going to lift the people who live in those zip codes out of poverty, or help them to remain out of poverty.
I was a corporate United Way campaign coordinator for a number of years back in the 80s and 90s when I had a real job, and have you fond memories of the traditional kind of United Way campaign. My sense is that United Way has evolved quite a bit since then, and I understand we just have kind of some news coming out from Angela Williams, the United Way worldwide director. How do you see United Way kind of evolving and the kind of shifting the role in the community from, again, if I shift all the way back with my blinders on, what I would have seen United Way as in 1983, it's pretty different now.
Yeah, I think just like everything that's happening in our society now, the United Way has to evolve just like every other organization is evolving. And we have to meet our populations where they are. We have to meet our donors where they are, and we have to meet the populations that we're serving where they are. When it comes to things like workplace campaigns, actually, we just kicked off quite a few this week. And I'm excited about those, and I was excited this morning about helping one organization kick their campaign off and the excitement around that. But what we're seeing right now, when we talk about evolving and with all of the United Ways and even, at United Way Worldwide, there's a lot of change in the platforms that people are giving and using, the platform that they're using, the platforms, how frequently they're using them. And we have to make sure that as an organization, that we are keeping up not only with the latest technology in terms of how people are giving, because you talk about those campaigns and writing a number down on a card, those days are not here. Just writing a number down on a piece of paper and then you turn it into someone at the office. There are multiple platforms people can give on their phone, they can give on their computers, and there's crowdsourcing. There's so many different ways that people can give. And one of the ways that we have to ensure that we are meeting our donors where they are, who are investing in us in our communities, is to make sure that we've made it as simple as possible for them to provide an investment to the organization. So that means that we have to continuously evolve our technology and continuously evolve the platforms through which we are communicating and people are giving. So that's one key area. The other area really is how donors are giving and why they're giving. And when we think about multi-generational giving, every generation has a passion for giving and has a passion for our communities. No one generation has a monopoly on that. But when we look at the data and we look at the trends, different generations may be giving different. So for example, you may have the boomers. That generation may have one or two core areas that they are very passionate about, and they will go deep and give in those areas. You may get to a Generation Zer who is just as passionate, but they will spread their giving across several different organizations. And we want to make sure that when we talk about the platforms, as I mentioned earlier, and staying on top of that, not only do we want to make sure we're meeting the donors and investors where they are in terms of a platform that they're giving, but we also want to make sure that we're understanding how and why they want to give and the areas that's important to them. So we go back to those community meet and greets and the communication. I think that's part of what we'll do to continuously evolve the United Way to function very well in the year 2022 and beyond. If we look at those two things, look at those trends of the platforms and then why different generations are giving differently in the multi-generational approach. So I think that ties in to the overall evolution of the organization from that standpoint.
So Fred, you mentioned the changes that you went through as head of workforce development. And I know for a lot of nonprofits here in Central Indiana, it's been challenging. The past few years have been extremely challenging. What advice would you give for staying inspired about the nonprofit mission, even though you may feel burnt out, it may feel overwhelming? Just any advice that you could give.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think everyone right now, it doesn't matter what sector you're in. I think there's a lot of COVID fatigue right now, and we have to address that head on and call it what it is. And that can creep into our day-to-day work, and it can limit the inspiration that we have about just the work. But what has never, in my opinion, has never been a dampening of inspiration is when someone realizes that, you know what, I have to do this work because there's a neighbor, there's a church member, there's someone who is going to benefit and who will benefit from the work that we're doing. That's the inspiration. And that's really going to, that can help lift us up, because it's a lot different when you're sitting and you're writing on a piece of paper some things that you want to do. And then when you see someone actually benefiting from it, one of the examples that I like to give is there's an organization here in Indianapolis that I went to, and it's a group of retirees who help connect people to jobs. So I was speaking to them one night. This was about 3.5, close to 4 years ago. I was speaking to them one night, and a young lady told me that she was having, some challenges enrolling in one of the technical programs, the certification programs that the Department of Workforce Development was having. So I asked if she reached out. A few days later, she reached out to me actually on LinkedIn. And she said, "Hey, I'm following up on having this challenge." Connected her to the right people. They got the challenge taken care of. It was a small technical issue. She'd enrolled in the course and they get the certification. About 3 months later, just out of the blue, I received a message that said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know I made the dean's list." So when you talk about inspiration, just when you're going about your day, you're thinking about a million and two other things, one of those moments happens. So if there's any person who may be having any COVID or any other type of fatigue and that inspiration seems to be waning, that moment is going to come when that one person that you may not have realized that you touched in such a way, they're going to reach out to you and they're going to tell you that that interaction made a difference. And so you talk about an inspiration to me, this person didn't have to send me that. And when I read that message from her, you talk about wanting to do better and wanting to go deeper. That one message did it for me too. So that's what I would say to those who may be waning a little bit and have a little bit of fatigue. Think about those that you've touched and you've served, and think about the many more that you can.
I have kind of a broader question. I think we have kind of an unusual situation right now in Central Indiana with a lot of new leaders coming into a lot of the significant organizations. From the Art Museum Newfields, I know INHP that there's somebody who kind of grew up in your organization, kind of hit it over there. And what is it? Visit Indy has it, somebody moving from the mayor's office as Shari moves on to her next chapter. From your standpoint, what opportunities or what possibilities is this a time that we should be anxious about, or is this an exciting time of new opportunity?
I think
I know which way I hope you'll go with that.
I think it's an exciting time for new opportunity because you only have one opportunity to be new, right? You're only new one time. And when you're new, you can bring into it a perspective that and try some things that maybe weren't seen through your own lenses before. Each leader is different. They bring to the table with their experience. They bring to the table, how they move in a particular space. But all of that is built upon the experiences that he or she has had. And when that person brings that into a new organization, and particularly even if it's a new sector, I think great things happen because the person comes into it with no perceived barriers and no perceived walls. So there are endless possibilities in the mind of a person who is coming into a situation. And they have, I think, also have the benefit of a predecessor, and they can learn a lot of things from his or her predecessor. And I have to say that with my predecessor, I couldn't have asked for a better transitional partner. Ann Mertlow has been an awesome transitional partner, and I continuously meet with her to get her perspective and to understand how things went over the years. And she has been open with me, and she's been very generous with her time. So I think that when you couple that with, a new perspective and new lenses, and you also have the benefit of someone coming beside you who's been there in that space and not trying to occupy the space, but helping you to expand your wings in that space, that's where the opportunity and the optimism comes. So I think all those new leaders that you just mentioned, I think there's so much potential there. And all of us have seen things in our past and with our own experiences, and we bring that to each one of these spaces. So I'm excited about it, particularly in this central Indiana area. Quite honestly, it's not uncommon for people to move into a space and have the help of others, particularly those who came before you. So that's that Hoosier hospitality. Remember, I said I'm a Hoosier by choice. Well, I'm here because the opportunities that have been put in my way, but also the individuals who've helped me along the way and gain perspective. And I want to make sure that I lean into that as much as possible. And I know the people that you mentioned are leaning into their support networks as well.
Okay, Fred. Well, we're happy that you decided to be a Hoosier by choice. So, any parting comments?
No. Well, I am happy to. I'm glad to spend this time with you today. I would just like to reiterate the things that I mentioned earlier about our real focus on trying to ensure that we remind people that every person has a purpose, and that if we can just help remove barriers from individuals in our communities, we can help them live the lives that they're capable of living. And if we do that, just think about how better off our entire communities would be. So I would just encourage all of those who are listening to really focus on the things that we know that make a difference in other people's lives. It could start from just saying hello to someone and giving them a kind word, all the way to helping remove any other type of barrier. Because you'd be surprised at how just a simple hello could remove a perceived barrier, and it allows that person to move a little bit forward, move a little bit faster in their day, which help them move a little closer to their goals of living how they're capable of living.
Thank you so much for that. Again, thank you for joining us for Charitable Advisors Not-for-Profit News, and I'm sure we'll see you around.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of the Charitable Advisors Not-for-Profit News podcast. Please subscribe where you listen to podcasts, and be sure to also subscribe to our weekly email newsletter at charitableadvisors.com, where we bring you the latest news, jobs, and training opportunities for nonprofits in Central Indiana.